problem perhaps which he or it is running, which is to say, in the process of solving, as a computer would. Variables along the linear time axis of our universe, thereby generating branched off lateral worlds. I have the impression that the metaphor of the chessboard is especially useful in evaluating how this can be done. In fact, must be. Across from the programmer-reprogrammer sits a counter-entity, whom Joseph Campbell calls the dark counterplayer. God, the programmer-reprogrammer, is not making his moves of improvement against inert matter. He is dealing with a cunning opponent. Let us say that on the game board, our universe in space-time, the dark counterplayer makes a move. He sets up a reality situation of immutable cause and effect. But the programmer-reprogrammer has already laid down his response. It has already happened, these moves on his part.
So I don't believe that we do have this counter fates to God. Or rather, if we do have it, then yes, but it is also something internal. It's our ego, it's our monkey mind, it is our doubts, our fears, that what has not been reprogrammed by ourselves yet. He just said that even if that counter player is making a move, all of that has been programmed already. And yes, if creation is finished, then every outcome has been created, every single situation has been created. Probably starting like you standing in front of your cupboards and trying to decide, do I want to wear the blue or the pink blouse that day? There's one reality where you wear the pink and one where you wear the blue. But everything already has been created. So even if there is some troubles, like the counter player is causing, that has been programmed by the programmer, by spirit, by God. So there is nothing outside of this creation. But also, again, I believe that there is nothing outside of us. So the counter player would also be part of ourselves, keeping us stuck in some kind of negative reality, negative experience. Yes, that has been programmed. Why? Because, again, the programmer, God's Spirit, wanted to have every single possible experience through us. Like all of them, they all must exist. And in order to find the light, sometimes we have to be in the dark in order to realize that we want to get to the light and to appreciate it. So it is all part of the same source, you could say. So the counter player cannot make any move that goes against the programmer, because the programmer created the counter player and also already created every possible move. So let's continue.
The printout, which we undergo as historic events, passes through stages of a dialectical interaction, thesis and antithesis, as the forces of the two players mingle. Evidently, some syntheses fall to the dark counterplayer, and yet they do not, by virtue of the fact that in advance our great advocate selected variables, the alternation of which brings final victory to him. In winning each sequence in turn, he claims some of us, we who participate in the sequence. This is why instinctively people pray, Libera me Domine, which decodes to mean, extricate me, programmer, as you achieve one victory after another. Include me in that triumph. Move me along the lateral axis so that I am not left out.
So, okay, nothing new to add, actually. I don't believe that the counter player is something outside of us, but yes, everything has been created by the programmer. And of course, we can pray, you could say, in order to manifest something or to get us out of this perceived darkness.
Sense as being left out means nothing other than remaining under the jurisdiction of or falling prey to the malignant power. But that malignant power, for all its guile, has already lost even as it wins. For in some way the counterplayer is blind, and so the programmer-reprogrammer possesses an advantage. I submit to you that such alterations, the creation or selection of such so-called alternative presence is continually taking place. The very fact that we can conceptually deal with this notion, that is, entertain it as an idea, is a first step in discerning such processes themselves. But I doubt if we will ever be able in any real fashion to demonstrate, to scientifically prove that such lateral change processes do occur.
Well, I'm not a physicist, but I just recently heard that more and more physicists now believe that we live in a holographic universe, because otherwise their math wouldn't make any sense. It would only make sense if that is what's actually really happening. So we may in the future see more science telling us, yes, there is this holograph, and we actually get to manifest with our focus, our thoughts, our assumptions. Let's get back.
Probably all we would have to go on would be vestiges of memory, fleeting impressions, dreams, nebulous intuitions that somehow things had been different in some way, and not long ago, but now. We might reflexively reach for a light switch in the bathroom only to discover that it always had been in another place entirely.
Okay, we already talked about this, right? Also about the experience I've had with the underground train station, and that viewer on my channel that commented underneath the "Can I manifest someone coming back from the dead" video about shifting timelines where things were completely different and always had been completely different, except for in our memory. It is in another part of the series, so make sure you watch that as well if you want to know what I'm talking about. But let's get back.
We might reach for the air vent in our car where there was no air vent, a reflex left over from a previous present still active at a subcortical level. We might dream of people and places we had never seen as vividly as if we had seen them and actually known them. But we would not know what to make of this, assuming we took time to ponder it at all. One very pronounced impression would probably occur to us, to many of us, again and again, and always without explanation. The acute, absolute sensation that we had done once before what we were just about to do now, that we, so to speak, lived in a particular moment or situation previously.
I believe what he's explaining here is something that some people would call a glitch in the matrix. Sometimes we remember something happening in a different timeline, even though we're not supposed to remember it in this. Like in the last video, I was talking about this viewer of mine who actually described having a fatal accident, and then it didn't happen all of a sudden. And I believe that that is something that would often happen to us, dying in one timeline, shifting to the next where this thing did not happen, but usually we would not take the memory from that incident into the next timeline. I believe that is something that is like a glitch, something that's not supposed to happen, but sometimes it does. So maybe it is supposed to happen for some, because again, we manifest everything, and maybe some people had the desire to have something amazing happening to them, or something unusual. It might be a subconscious desire, something maybe that proves something to them, like a question they had, and the universe always delivers. So are there mistakes? I don't believe that there can be mistakes, because creation is finished, which means that even though we may call it a glitch, then also that glitch already has been created. It was always meant to happen in that specific timeline, because maybe that was part of what that soul chose to experience and to grow from there, to thrive from there, because things like this really can turn a life around. And so that was, again, maybe something that always has been meant to happen, but it's not common to happen. I believe usually we would forget. But he's talking about deja vu, like we have the memory of doing something that has never happened, but then time is an illusion. That could be another thing. Time is an illusion. It hasn't happened to our experience. We haven't consciously experienced it yet, but it already has been created. And so there is part of us who already knows or senses what is about to happen. And maybe in that short moment, there is a glitch when it comes to perceiving time, and we perceive doing something that we haven't done yet, because again, everything already happened at the same time, and we just perceive linear time because our brains would not really be able to decipher everything happening at once, and we want to make this human experience. But maybe something went a little bit wrong. But when I say it went wrong, still it was meant to happen because it had been created that way. But out of the norm, you could say something went a little bit out of the norm. And there is this glitch in perceiving time that is supposed to be linear, but it's like a jump to something that hasn't happened yet, and then realizing, wait, that hasn't happened yet, and then maybe jumping back because we realize, wait, that hasn't happened yet, and then we go back to where it hasn't happened yet and we are about to do it. That's just something that just popped into my mind, and it's just still working. Yeah, I think that is what a deja vu might be. There's like this jump, there's like this little, like when you have a film. You remember the old videotapes, and sometimes when they like tore, and imagine you had to cut out a tiny piece and then glue together with a Tesafilm. I don't know the word for it, but then you glued it back together, and then there's like this little jump because something stopped. And a deja vu may be like the experience of that tiny jump, but in that moment realizing, wait, this is not right, and just focusing on it, like this is not right, this hasn't happened, manifests in that hasn't happened yet, and then jumping back and then making the experience we should have made in the first time. I don't know if that really is a deja vu, if that's how it works. It's just something that's, again, I channeled right now, but please leave your comments. Have you had deja vus, and what are your personal theory on deja vus? How does it happen? But let's go back to the video.
But in what sense could it be called previously, since only the present, not the past, was evidently involved? We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, deja vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off, became actualized instead of the prior one, and that in fact, in literal fact, we are once more living this particular segment of linear time.
Well, of course, that could happen as well, but I don't believe that realities get created while we're living our life, but that already has happened. And so there could be, like a pathways of, in this reality we did this, and then you either go track A or track B, and your soul just chose to take the other track, and that you could say it's like a somewhat conscious realization of shifting to a timeline, and that of course can create the sensation of deja vu as well. So that is his theory, and of course it could be plausible as well that in that moment there the shift, but where I don't believe he is right is that it gets created in that moment. I believe it already has been created, and then there is just like this separation of alternates. There's like the same past, and then there is the crossway, and maybe we went a little bit down there and then jumped to that one in like a very short time. So how long does a deja vu usually last? It's like instant, right? It's something that's like a second or something like that, and we just feel, okay, there is the sensation of a timeline shift, because sometimes we can feel those. Sometimes we can feel like dizziness. I believe sometimes I feel that I believe is a shift, and it's hard to put in words. It's just like something changed from one second to the other. It's like an energetical thing. You realize something is like a ringing in the ear, and then you just realize something changed, but it's hard to put your finger on it because it is nothing that really changed on your outside, nothing changed in your apartment. It's just like a sensation that the energy is a little bit different in that, like from second to second. But let's return to the video.
A breaching, a tinkering, a change had been made, but not in our present, had been made in our past. Evidently, such an alteration would have a peculiar effect on those persons involved. They would, so to speak, be moved back one square or several squares on the board game which constitutes our reality.
Well, of course, a change in the past can be made as well, and that is where some of my clients struggle. You know, they, like, one thing happened and then all of a sudden it was something else. And when you shift to a different timeline, you know, there's like a past, present, future in this one, and then a whole new past, present, future in that. And then when you shift, there it has been another past in this one. And so it could be sometimes that your memory does get altered a little. I said earlier, the example about the Muslims and the Quran, you can check out the other video if you're interested in that. But I believe that sometimes, yeah, our memory does get altered a little bit. I have read about that as well. And I have made my own experience like this. I have two best friends, they're sisters, and I exactly remember meeting one of them, and I remember seeing her sister for the first time. And then I don't remember getting friends with her. And at one time I said to her, you know, it's weird. I was like thinking about how we became friends. It was like all of a sudden you were there and you were my friend. And she also couldn't remember how we became friends. She was like, yeah, you're right. One day I was there and I was your friend. And then we were thinking about, yeah, of course, we met like together with her sister, my best friend. And then we met separately. Yes, I do remember, but not very clear. And I don't really remember us getting closer. It was just like one of a sudden she was close to me and she was my friend. And I don't really remember that happening. And neither one of us three can actually remember that happening. So sometimes when you jump into a timeline, you're like missing a part, you know, the part of us becoming friends. I jumped into a timeline where we already were friends. And so the becoming friends part, we didn't really consciously experience. So that's a little bit weird, I know. So sometimes we don't have all of the memory when we shift. But let's go back to the video.
Conceivably, this could happen any number of times, affecting any number of people, as alternative variables were reprogrammed. We would have to live out each reprogramming along the subsequent linear time axis. But to the programmer, whom we call God, to him the results of the programming would be apparent at once. We are within time, and he is not.
Yes, I believe our soul does experience all of our different, let's call it incarnations, all of the different timelines, all of our different experiences. So that is outside of ourselves. But of course, consciously, we couldn't process like different experiences, like getting the job and not getting the job at the same time, right? So there is one part of us who experiences this and then another one who experiences that. I believe that ultimately we do experience everything, but not in the same lifetime. So again, I believe reincarnation is jumping from timeline to timeline to timeline, and what we did not experience in one, we then consciously experience in the other, and our soul experiences all simultaneously because time does not exist and it is outside of time, whereas our perception is within time.